16-year-old Fawn Marie Cox had 11 hours to live. She didn't know it yet. She was standing behind a cash register at Worlds of Fun amusement park in Kansas City, Missouri, counting tips from another long shift. July 25, 1989. While the world watched the Berlin Wall begin to crack, Fawn was focused on something simpler. Every dollar she earned that summer had a purpose. She was saving for her own car, dreaming of the independence that would come with her senior year of high school. By sunrise, she would be dead. Strangled in her own bedroom. Sexually assaulted by someone who knew exactly which window to climb through. Someone she trusted. Someone who had sat at her family's dinner table, passed the salt at holidays, looked her parents in the eye. And for 31 years, that person would walk free, hiding in plain sight at every family gathering. This is the story of how science finally gave Fawn a voice. If cases like this matter to you, cases where families refuse to give up and justice takes decades to arrive, you're in the right place. Here at Cold Case Beacon, we shine a light on the forgotten, the unsolved, and the stories that deserve to be told. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below with your thoughts. Now let's go back to the night that shattered the Cox family forever. To understand what happened to Fawn Marie Cox, you need to understand the house where she died. The two-story home on East 9th Street at Van Brunt Boulevard sat in a neighborhood shadowed by gang violence. The 9th Street Dogs operated openly in the area, known for burglaries, theft, and intimidation. Everyone who lived there understood the risks. But for John and Beverly Cox and their 3 daughters, this was home. The family had converted their first-floor dining room into a bedroom, giving the girls more space upstairs. Fawn, the eldest, had her own room. Her younger sisters, Amber and Felisa, shared another across the hall. The bathroom was old, the kind where sound traveled freely through thin walls. But there was one feature of this house that would prove catastrophic. The windows were almost never locked. Years earlier, the family had accidentally locked themselves out. Amber, the most adventurous of the 3 sisters, climbed the side of the house to Fawn's second-floor window and let everyone back inside. After that, it became routine. During summer months, the upstairs windows stayed unlocked for ventilation, for emergency access, for the breeze that made the oppressive heat bearable. It was practical. Innocent. And it was an open invitation to anyone who knew the house well enough. Just outside, in the alley behind the home, sat John Cox's bright orange dumpster truck. It had been parked directly beneath the girls' windows for so long that no one thought about it anymore. It was just part of the landscape. But on the night of July 25, that truck became a ladder. Fawn Cox was the responsible one. She helped raise her younger sisters. She worked long shifts without complaint. On weekends, she roller-skated with Amber and Felisa. She never missed church on Sundays. Her best friend, Donna McGee, lived across the street, and together they spent summer evenings talking about boys, high school, the future. Fawn was quiet but dependable. The kind of daughter parents relied on. The kind of sister who protected her siblings. She wanted freedom. She wanted her own car, her own independence, her own life. On the evening of July 25, she was one step closer. Around 11 o'clock that night, Beverly Cox and Felisa drove to Worlds of Fun to pick up Fawn. She climbed into the back seat, exhausted, her feet aching from hours of standing. All she wanted was to go home and sleep. When they arrived, the house was stifling. The Cox family owned only one air conditioning unit, an old rumbling machine crammed into the window of John and Beverly's downstairs bedroom. It was loud, drowning out nearly every other sound in the house. Felisa often slept on the couch in her parents' room just to escape the heat. But Fawn valued her privacy. She didn't mind the warmth if it meant having her own space. So while the rest of the family settled downstairs in the cool air, Fawn climbed the stairs alone. She changed into her nightshirt. The lock on her bedroom door had been broken for months, so she improvised. She wedged a steak knife into the doorframe, a makeshift barrier that gave her some sense of security. Then she set her alarm clock, climbed into bed, and closed her eyes. Downstairs, the air conditioner roared. John Cox, a notoriously deep sleeper, was already snoring. Beverly and Felisa drifted off on the couch. Amber was across the street, babysitting. The house settled into silence. But someone was already inside. Hidden in the upstairs hallway. Waiting in the darkness. Watching Fawn's door. Sometime between midnight and 2 o'clock in the morning, the family's small poodle began to whimper. The dog was pregnant and normally calm, but suddenly it became frantic. It barked with an urgency that cut through even the rumble of the air conditioner. Felisa stirred on the couch, groggy and irritated. She got up, went to the dog, spoke softly until it quieted down. Half asleep, she assumed it was just pregnancy nerves. She went back to bed. That was the only disturbance anyone remembered. But that dog knew. Animals sense danger in ways humans cannot. That poodle was screaming a warning no one understood. The night continued. The air conditioner hummed. The family slept. And upstairs, in Fawn's bedroom, something unimaginable was happening. Morning came slowly on July 26, 1989. Around 9 or 10 o'clock, Fawn's alarm clock began to ring. It was one of those old relentless alarms designed to wake even the heaviest sleeper. It rang and rang and rang. But Fawn didn't turn it off. John Cox needed to use the upstairs bathroom. He made his way up the stairs and past Fawn's room, noting the blaring alarm. The bathroom connected to her bedroom, a design common in older homes. He had seen his daughter in her nightclothes during morning routines before. It was never strange. But this morning felt different. He glanced into her room. Fawn was lying in bed, motionless, in an odd position. He noticed she wasn't wearing underwear beneath her nightshirt. Concerned but not yet alarmed, he quickly pulled a blanket over her to preserve her modesty, then continued to the bathroom. He thought she was just sleeping deeply. Downstairs, Beverly Cox was growing uneasy. That alarm had been ringing far too long. Fawn was never a heavy sleeper. She called up to Felisa. "Go check on your sister." Felisa climbed the stairs, irritation mixing with worry. She pushed open Fawn's door and called out. Then she saw it. Fawn was lying completely still. Her body had an unnatural rigidity. Her skin had turned a disturbing shade of blue. There was fabric, a gown, wrapped tight around her neck. Felisa screamed. Beverly Cox ran up those stairs faster than she had ever moved in her life. When she saw her daughter lying there lifeless, her mind couldn't process it. For one desperate, irrational moment, she wondered if Fawn had done this to herself. She dialed 911, her hands shaking so violently she could barely hold the phone. The ambulance arrived within minutes, but it was already too late. Fawn had been dead for hours. Her body was cold, stiff with rigor mortis. The paramedics stepped back. This was a crime scene now. When Amber came home from babysitting, she found police cars lining the street, yellow tape across the front door, investigators swarming the house. Her parents were in shock. Felisa was sobbing. And upstairs, detectives were beginning to understand exactly what had happened. The detectives who entered Fawn's bedroom knew immediately this was no accident. She had been strangled. The medical examiner confirmed it. Strangulation was the cause of death. But there was more. Fawn had also been sexually assaulted. This wasn't random. This was deliberate, brutal, and personal. The crime scene told a confusing story. In Fawn's closet, blankets had been yanked out and left in a heap on the floor. Down in the yard, below the second-story window to Amber and Felisa's room, investigators found a stereo and a Nintendo console sitting in the grass, as if someone had thrown them out the window planning to grab them on the way out, then abandoned them in a panic. The entry point was obvious. Someone had climbed John Cox's orange dumpster truck, scrambled onto the canopy of the outbuilding, and slipped through the unlocked window. Inside, crime scene technicians collected evidence. Short hairs that didn't belong to Fawn. Small bloodstains. And critically, traces of semen on her bedsheet. In 1989, that DNA evidence was nearly useless. All investigators could do was compare blood types. There were no databases, no genetic markers. Just educated guesses. They also found something strange. An old army cap in Fawn's room. None of her family recognized it. Fawn never wore anything like that. Whose was it? And then there was the steak knife. The same one Fawn had used to secure her broken door lock. Found at the scene. Possibly used to intimidate her into silence. One detail troubled investigators more than anything. Fawn's bed was on wheels. In a violent struggle, that bed would have rolled across the room unless someone held it steady. Did that mean there were two attackers? One assaulting Fawn, the other keeping the bed from moving? But if that was true, why did the DNA evidence show only one person? It was a question that would haunt this case for decades. Within weeks, police attention turned to the 9th Street Dogs. The gang was notorious in the area. Burglaries, thefts, violence. Everyone in the neighborhood knew them. Everyone feared them. But there was another connection. Fawn had been dating someone tied to the gang. After her death, the boyfriend was so destroyed he enlisted in the military and left Kansas City entirely, as if trying to outrun the memory. Then in August 1989, just 1 month after the murder, police arrested 3 teenagers. One of them was in Fawn's class at Northeast High School. The other 2 were known associates. A witness had come forward with detailed information the police had deliberately withheld from the public. This witness knew things only someone involved could know. For the first time since Fawn's death, her family felt hope. One of the teenagers was charged by a grand jury with first-degree murder. He spent 8 months in jail while prosecutors built their case. The Cox family began to believe justice was finally coming. And then everything collapsed. The DNA didn't match. The fingerprints on the knife didn't match. And the witness, the linchpin of the entire case, suddenly recanted. They claimed they had lied. They stopped cooperating. Without testimony, without DNA, the prosecution had nothing. All 3 suspects were released. Charges dropped. But before they walked free, one of them confessed. During interrogation, he admitted breaking into the Cox house that night. He described climbing the orange truck, crossing the canopy, slipping through the window. He even gave details the police hadn't released. Like how when he threw the tape recorder out the window, the handle snapped off. He told them exactly where he had hidden it. Under a bush near the house. Police searched. They found it right where he said. This wasn't a guess. This was someone who had been there. But he insisted he and his friends only came to steal. They took the Nintendo, the stereo, some radios, tossed them out the window to collect on the way out. According to him, they never went into Fawn's room. Never saw her. Never knew a murder had happened. Then, just as quickly, he withdrew the confession. Stopped talking. The story evaporated. Without his testimony, without DNA linking them to the assault and murder, prosecutors had nothing. The case went cold. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with "I'm still here." Let's see who's truly following this shocking story. For the Cox family, this was torture. They knew those boys had been in the house. The confession proved it. One of them even spent 8 months in jail for stealing Fawn's belongings. But knowing and proving are 2 different things. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Months became years. And Fawn's real killer kept walking free. The Cox family refused to let Fawn become another forgotten statistic. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, John and Beverly became warriors for their daughter. They held fundraisers. They erected billboards across Kansas City. They offered rewards. $3,000 in 2000. Then $10,000 in 2019. Beverly gave interview after interview, her voice steady but broken. "Money does a lot on the streets," she said. "That's what we're hoping and praying for." Amber became the family's relentless investigator. She scoured every true crime forum, every cold case website, every mention of Fawn's name. When she found discussions about the case, she would reach out, thank people, ask if they had information. In 2018, she posted detailed facts on a verified cold case forum, information the police had never made public. She explained that normally she would have been sleeping in the room where the burglars entered, but that night she had been babysitting. The killers had either gotten lucky, or they had been watching long enough to know the family's schedule. Despite everything, the case stayed frozen. Why? Because in 1989, DNA technology barely existed. Even in the early 2000s, when databases like Cody's went online, Fawn's DNA samples were uploaded and checked against thousands of criminals. No matches. The DNA didn't belong to anyone in the system. The Cox family watched other cold cases from the 70s and 80s get solved using genetic genealogy. The same breakthrough that caught the Golden State Killer. Why not Fawn's case? The answer was crushing. Money. Most people don't realize that solving cold cases isn't just about science. It's about funding. Advanced DNA testing, genetic genealogy, is expensive. Only a handful of labs worldwide can do it. Waiting lists stretch for years. Police departments have to choose which cases get priority. For years, the Kansas City police told the Cox family the same thing. "We're working on it. We just need funding." In 2019, the family decided to take control. They launched a fundraiser to pay for the testing themselves. Within weeks, they raised $10,000, plus the cost of genealogical analysis. They walked into the police department with the money, ready for answers. The police said no. Detective Benjamin Caldwell explained the impossible position. If they accepted money from one family, it would create a two-tiered justice system. Wealthy families could pay to solve cases faster. Poorer families would wait indefinitely. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. The Cox family understood the logic, but understanding didn't ease the pain. Felisa said it plainly. If this had been a rich family or someone important, this case would have been solved immediately. She was right. But in the summer of 2020, everything changed. In June 2020, the federal government launched Operation Legend, a massive initiative to combat violent crime in American cities. Named after 4-year-old Legend Taliaferro, who was murdered in Kansas City, the operation brought something the Cox family had been praying for. Federal funding. FBI resources. Advanced labs. Genetic genealogy testing. Captain Ben Caldwell, recently promoted, saw an opportunity. He submitted Fawn's case for the new testing protocol. It was approved. The DNA samples collected in 1989, the semen from Fawn's bedsheet, were sent to Parabon Nanolabs, one of the world's leading genetic genealogy firms. The process is remarkable. Instead of just comparing DNA to criminal databases, genetic genealogy compares it to millions of people who have uploaded DNA to ancestry websites. Scientists build family trees, identifying distant relatives, slowly narrowing the suspect pool. It's painstaking, but it works. For weeks, the Cox family waited, barely breathing. Then on November 11, 2020, 31 years and 4 months after Fawn's murder, the Kansas City police called with news. They had identified the killer. The name shattered everything the family thought they knew. Donald Lee Cox Jr. Not a stranger. Not a 9th Street dog. Not some faceless monster from the shadows. Donald Lee Cox Jr. was Fawn's cousin. He was 21 years old when he murdered her. Just 5 years older. He knew the house intimately. He had been a guest there dozens of times. He knew which windows stayed unlocked. He knew the family's routines. He knew Fawn would be alone upstairs that night. And he used every bit of that knowledge to rape and strangle her. For 31 years, Donald sat at family dinners. He passed the salt at Christmas. He looked John and Beverly in the eye at Thanksgiving. He attended Fawn's funeral and mourned alongside the family whose daughter he had murdered. He never said a word. According to Amber, there had always been something dark about Donald. She later revealed he had sexually abused younger girls in the family, secrets buried in shame and fear. But no one imagined he was capable of murder. The family would never confront him in court. Because Donald Lee Cox Jr. died in 2006, 14 years before science caught up to him. He overdosed on drugs. His death was investigated due to suspicious circumstances, and during the autopsy, investigators preserved a blood sample. But because Donald was the victim in that case, his DNA was never entered into criminal databases. It just sat in storage. Waiting. In 2020, when Parabon built the genetic family tree, it led directly to Donald. Detectives requested his stored blood sample and compared it to the semen from Fawn's bedroom. 100% match. 31 years. And the monster had been hiding at the family table all along. Even with Donald identified, questions remain. What about the 3 teenagers? The ones who confessed to the burglary? The ones whose stolen items littered the yard? Did Donald work with them? Was he part of the break-in, then stayed behind when things went too far? Or did he enter separately, hiding in that upstairs closet while the boys looted downstairs, waiting for his moment? Police closed the case without additional charges. According to Felisa, there was no point. Even if those boys were in the house, there's no evidence they participated in murder. Only Donald's DNA was found on Fawn. Maybe they never knew what he did. Maybe they threw those items out the window and ran, and Donald stayed behind in the darkness. We'll never know. The second question is darker. In 1984, 5 years before Fawn's murder, a 20-year-old woman named Tracy Snow vanished from the same neighborhood. She was Fawn's neighbor. She was never found. Donald Cox would have been 16. Could he have been responsible? How many other victims might there be? How many families are still waiting for answers about daughters who never came home? Donald lived 17 years after killing Fawn. He was arrested repeatedly for theft and drugs. He caused pain everywhere he went. Then his addiction killed him. Some call it karma. Others call it escape. Fawn Marie Cox was 16 years old when she died. She was saving her tips to buy a car. She roller skated with her sisters on weekends. She never missed church. She had friends, dreams, a future waiting. All of it was stolen on July 26, 1989. Her family spent 31 years refusing to let her be forgotten. Billboards. Fundraisers. Interviews. They never stopped fighting. And eventually, the truth emerged. But it came with unbearable pain, because the man who murdered Fawn was supposed to protect her. He was family. Captain Ben Caldwell said it best. This one touched a lot of people because she was an innocent child who was murdered in her own bed. Fawn's case shows how far forensic science has come and how fragile justice can be. Without genetic genealogy, Donald Cox would have died anonymous, and the Cox family would never have known. Her story reminds us of 3 things. Evil doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it sits at your dinner table, passing the potatoes, smiling. Justice delayed is not justice denied. Even decades later, science can give victims a voice. And families like the Coxes, who refuse to surrender, who fight year after year, are the true heroes. Fawn should be 51 today. She should have graduated, married, had children, grown old with her sisters. Instead, she's frozen at 16. But she is not forgotten. If this case moved you, if you believe stories like Fawn's deserve to be told, please subscribe to Cold Case Beacon. Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts or suggesting other cases you think need attention. Share this video with someone who cares about justice. Together, we can keep these victims' memories alive and shine a light on the cases the world has forgotten. Thank you for watching. Rest in peace, Fawn Marie Cox. Your fight is over.